Grayson Grundhoefer, Bearcast co-host, also a part of the recruiting in many ways. Covers that like you wouldn't believe it. Also, college football analyst and even basketball joins us on 365 Sports. And Grayson, thank you very much. It's a night game. They're back home. Seems like it's been forever. It's a game that has incredible meaning to it, what it means for both teams in the Big 12. How critical is it, in your opinion, when it comes to this weekend's recruiting as well?
It's a huge one. I mean, this is a weekend that I think a lot of people had been kind of waiting for. I know that Baylor fans in particular, you go through the course of the season, and there were a few big games on the schedule when you looked at Oklahoma State. At the time, they were a top 10 team, basically. But if you look at their schedule, really, they didn't play any of the best teams on it in the early part of the season, and that's just kind of the way things played out in the Big 12 this year. But now you get an opportunity against the top 25 Kansas State team, and obviously the TCU games next week and the Texas game. But all your big games are coming up late in the season, so I think that adds to it as well. But you're exactly right. With it being a blackout atmosphere, with it being a night game, which is the first Big 12 night game Baylor has had in 2 years, so it's a big deal in that regard as well. And you know that the environment's going to be electric for recruits, right? Because it's this atmosphere, it's a sellout, it's an opportunity for Baylor to show a lot of recruits kind of what they're all about and what they've been building towards throughout this season, and just how much better they've gotten throughout the year. And so I think that is going to be huge. So yeah, if they play really well, I think that could be doing some very nice things for them on the recruiting trail, but obviously it's more important that they get the win than anything else.
Who are the recruits that are going to be in attendance that you know of?
I mean, it's a long list, so I'm not going to go through every single name or anything like that, but quite a few of the commits will be there. Austin Novosad will be there. He's got his playoff game tonight, but he'll be in attendance. There's quite a few other ones. DJ Coleman, DK Kalu, the big defense lineman out of Ridgepoint, who obviously won his first playoff game of the year yesterday. They knocked off Katie Tompkins in what was a pretty big upset. Mason Dossett, who's also at Ridgepoint. He's a 2024 guy, so he's going to be in attendance as well. He's a big time prospect. There's quite a few. I mean, it's going to be a very good one, a very fun atmosphere, I think, for all recruits involved. And so I think that this is going to be an exciting time. And for Baylor's side of things, they brought in a really good group for this game. They'll bring in another really good group next game. So it's going to be very important that they show a good on-the-field product as well as an off-the-field product, too.
Speaking of that on-the-field product, Grayson, I know it's been a few days now. It doesn't really have a ton of bearing, but it is, what we can base our last, glimpse of this football team on is that win over Oklahoma. What did that tell you about this team? Everybody's got their different thoughts, but what were your main thoughts coming out of that game?
Yeah, so I think after the Oklahoma game, the main thing that really comes to mind is that Baylor continues to go back to this RVO style, right? And that's been something that's done really well for them offensively. They just continue to turn around, hand the ball off, establish line of scrimmage, and try to dominate up front. And when they're able to run the football effectively, it makes them really tough to beat. And so when you watch the game against Oklahoma, as well as the games before that against Texas Tech and Kansas, they were able to dominate up front, move the pile, and get 5 yards basically every time they ran the football, which then sets up everything for them offensively, takes a lot of the pressure off of Blake Shapen. And that's what they've continued to trend towards. And that's what they did in Norman. They established that front. They were able to run the ball effectively. And then you could see Blake Shapen make a few throws here and there as well. On the defensive side, they continue to do what they've done all year, which is be really good for stretches and then really inconsistent for other stretches. And so it's going to be very important for them, I think, in this one that their tackling gets a lot better because in Norman and, of course, in Morgantown, they really struggled in that regard. The first guy really wasn't making the play. It was the second or third guy. So they're going to need to correct that because Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez can make life miserable for you if you're not able to make tackles in the open field.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Do you feel like the turnovers Baylor has either been forcing, they forced, or in some cases gifts? Is it because they're starting to grow up in the secondary or because teams have just not protected the football in Texas Tech and obviously last week as well?
Yeah, I think it's two sides of it. I think Dave Aranda has had really, really good game plans going into both games. Now, against Texas Tech, that game plan worked a little bit better. They were able to create turnovers, but also keep Tech from moving the football. Against Oklahoma, a team that can actually run the ball, Baylor really struggled. Baylor gave up a lot of yards. They gave up a lot of points. And so, yes, they forced the turnovers, and that's been great. And that's because Dave Aranda's put them in good positions, in my eyes, to make plays. You also noticed, TJ Franklin, for instance, batting that pass that ended up being an interception by Dylan Doyle. That's just a guy making a play. Lorando Johnson, he got in front of a pass and disrupted it, and then Christian Morgan picked it off on the backside. Like, those are things that of a player making a play, and it's Dave Aranda putting a guy in a position to go make that play as well. So I think it's two sides of the coin. But in general, this defense still needs to grow up even more. I think that's very clear to me. It's not just the secondary, it's really everyone. They need to come together even more, especially when it comes to tackling. Just the little things, right? Tackling and not allowing guys to get wide open downfield like we saw with Marvin Mims. They got to just shore some things up. And if they can do that, they can make a nice run here in November.
Grayson Grundhoefer, 365 Sports with us. Baylor, home against Kansas State tomorrow night just after 6 o'clock at McLean Stadium.
Grayson, what did you think of Squirrel Williams finally having a day where it wasn't supplemental, where he was the guy?
Yeah, I would say that was really fun to see, right? Because I think for the longest time we've talked about Squirrel and how talented he is and just the kind of impact he can actually have on the field, but it's just been injury after injury after injury. So finally this year, he's been injured some this year as well, but to see him on the field and getting 20-plus carries and really being the workhorse running back because Richard Reese obviously wasn't able to play up to his potential due to the flu, it was great to see Squirrel have that role and really assert himself and dominate. And when Baylor has all of their running backs, they're going to be really, really good. The problem is we haven't seen that even once this year. So I'm hoping as the season progresses here, you're able to see kind of a three-headed monster with Squirrel and Richard Reese and Quaylen and even Tay McWilliams if he's able to be, fully productive whenever he comes back. That would be great to see because the offensive line's really starting to click. So now they just need those running backs to get healthy and really all come together. And if they can, you could see something really, really special.
How has Blake Shapen played versus your preseason expectations?
Blake really, I think that, I think I've probably been maybe too harsh on Blake as far as when I watch him. And I think that's because of the expectations I had for him coming into the year. And I think it's fair to sit there and think coming into the year that he would just have, a few games here and there where he'd throw for 300 and something yards and 4 touchdowns and really expand the offense down the field. But in hindsight, that's not really what Baylor wants to do. Baylor wants to run the football and establish the run first. And all they want out of Blake Shapen is to complete passes downfield when given the opportunity in the play action and then be accurate and make the proper reads on third down or on second and short and be able to really take advantage of the things that the offense is setting up for him and of what the defense is showing him. And so I think he's been more of a just kind of game manager up to this point. I hate using that term, but that kind of is what he has been. So I'm hoping as this, we see these next few games, I think he will get tested more because I think these next 3 teams will do everything they can to take away the run game. And you might get to see Blake Shapen have some more opportunities to take shots downfield. Now, the question is, can he take care of the football? Can he not fumble it? Can he not throw costly interceptions? And can he actually convert on those opportunities? That's to be determined. But I think up to this point in the season, I would probably say he's been a little below my expectations just because I really felt like he was going to do some crazy things this year. And in hindsight, I got to remember, he hasn't really started very many games. He's still kind of new to this fold as well. And teams are actually preparing for him, right? So that's the other side of it too. But I think there's great times ahead for him as a Baylor Bear, though.
Did you think this is who he would be when they made the announcement he was QB1 and Bohannon was not?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? Because coming into it, you kind of thought, okay, so now Blake's just going to throw it all over the place because they decided to go with more of a pocket passer instead of what Gary Bohannon was a year ago. But I really do think that Blake is still doing some things that are probably a little more hidden than people realize. Like those throws across the middle of the field, Gary just simply was not making those consistently enough. The throws against Texas Tech over the top of the defense, again, those are throws that only Blake can make of the quarterbacks on the roster. And so I think that's pretty key. And I think that's something that's probably underrated a little bit because I think everyone had these just massive expectations for him. And I do think you see glimpses, but now you just need to see him kind of put the whole thing together. And if he can, that raises this team's ceiling to a whole nother level, to a point where, hey, maybe they can go out and win another Big 12 championship and repeat, go back to a Sugar Bowl and accomplish all the things that they were trying to accomplish early in the season.
Thank you, Grayson. Appreciate your time. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com recruiting analyst, co-host with Greg on the Bearcast, and also college football analyst, and does jump right into men's basketball.